The truth is that we may be derailing our ministries without even realizing it because we are unaware of some of our less than healthy habits, attitudes, and baggage. In this episode, I'm joined by Mckenzie. Michael is an ordained pastor, a licensed professional counselor, the executive director of Marble Retreat, and the author of Don't Blow Up Your Ministry. Together, Michael and I explore some surprising ways that we can self-sabotage our ministries. And we provide hope by highlighting some healthy habits and practices that we can engage in so we can give God, our families, and our ministries our absolute best. Are you ready? Let's go. Hey friends, it's Jason Day coming to you with another insightful episode of Front Stage Backstage, where every single week I have the privilege of sitting down with a trusted ministry leader and diving into a topic to help you and ministry leaders just like you embrace a healthy, sustainable rhythm for both life and ministry. And we are proud to be a part of the Pastor Serve Network. And our coaches at Pastor Serve went to bless you, pastors, with a free 1-hour complimentary coaching session. And so you can learn more about that at pastorserve.org/free session. If there's something you're going through, you just want someone to talk to, we'd love to have the privilege of sitting down and connecting with you. So you can find out more details at pastorserve.org/free session. And then, as I mentioned, we are part of the Pastor Serve Network. And one of the cool things that we do with every single episode is we create an entire toolkit, absolutely free for you, that helps you and your ministry leaders dig more deeply into the topic that we are discussing so that you can grow. And you can find all of that complete toolkit at pastorserve.org/network. So be sure to check that out. It's just a way for you and your team to grow as ministry leaders. And now if you're joining us on YouTube, give us a thumbs up and just drop your name and the name of your church below. We love to get to know our audience better, and our team will be praying for you and for your ministry. And whether you're joining us on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform, please take a moment to subscribe, to follow, because you do not want to miss out on any of these great conversations. And as I said, I have an excellent conversation for you today. I think you're going to find a lot of value from this. And I'd like to welcome Michael Mckenzie to Front Stage Backstage. And so, Michael, welcome.
Thank you very much, Jason. So great to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have you, brother. It's good to introduce you to our audience. And one of the things that you share, you have a lot of things going on in your life, and you have the privilege of really walking alongside of pastors and ministry leaders. So, Michael, can you just share with us a little bit about kind of your role in the kingdom and what it is you do?
Yeah, currently I'm the director of Marble Retreat. Marble Retreat is an intensive counseling center for pastors and other Christian leaders, but pastors are the main client that we see there, and they come for 8 days. So it's called intensive. It means a lot of counseling in a short period of time. And it's up in Marble, Colorado, kind of the backside of Aspen. Beautiful lodge, been up there for near 50 years now. And my wife and I were there for, a lot of years, like 15 years, and we were counselors and directors there, and we just transitioned to a different role, and I'm the executive director there currently.
Excellent. That's awesome, brother. Now, um, one of the things that you share, and you share this in your most recent book, Don't Blow Up Your Ministry, which is a fantastic book. But you talk about the idea that being a ministry leader is really a dangerous job. And I'm sure a lot of pastors and ministry leaders who are watching, who are listening in, would agree, and I would too, that it's not an easy job. It's not a stress-free job, right? It's not always an appreciated job. But Michael, help us understand, what exactly do you mean by the fact that it's a dangerous job?
Yeah, I think there's a few unique, factors to a pastor's position that make it dangerous. One is just the spiritual warfare aspect. Who else does Satan not want to take out more than a pastor? How much more can he damage the kingdom than by taking out a pastor? And they're the people that they minister and that they influence and all that. So I think that's a part of it. Another part is that the nature of ministry, and this shouldn't be the way it is, but it is often the way it is that we're not always free to talk about our struggles when we're pastors. It's not always a safe place, especially right within our own community. And so we'll be struggling because we're humans like everybody else, but we have to kind of feel like we need to keep it a secret. And secrets are dangerous, as the old saying is, we're only as sick as our secrets. So I think that's another factor that makes it dangerous, that a lot of pastors are wrestling and struggling, but they don't know where to go, who to talk to, where it would be safe to begin to share what they're going through because they're risk maybe they're fear they might lose their job, or people won't respect them if they know they're having doubts or depression or anxiety. So I think that's another big factor, is just that, is it safe for me to be open and honest about my struggles? The third is just the immense pressure that we carry, and that's external at times, but also internal. I mean, it's a serious role. We know the importance to the kingdom, and that's why we serve pastors. We love pastors. They're on the front lines. We want to be there for them because we believe in the importance of their role. But with the importance of that role comes a lot of responsibility, which can turn into stress and pressure. So I think that can add into the mix as well to make it all dangerous.
Yeah, that's helpful. And Michael, as you talk about this idea of a safe space to share, um, share with us a little bit about, because I imagine many who again are watching or listening in resonate a little bit with that, where there's a little bit of a feeling of perhaps I don't know if fear is the right word, but just unsafety, right? Like a lack of safety rather. There's, when we're trying to wrestle through things or move through things in our own lives, navigate things, it's hard to be open. So talk to us a little bit about that safe space and the value and importance of that when it comes to having a healthy ministry.
Well, I think a lot of pastors have just learned to naturally be a bit self-protective and don't even realize we're doing it at times. I say we because I've been in that space in my life, and so we don't realize that there's a bit of a guard up, and we're weighing our words, and we can't be just totally ourselves. And we got so used to we don't even know. So if you're really going to grow and learn, especially about our own brokenness, which is what I deal with in the book, then we need a place where we don't have to measure our words or worry about consequences or worry about how they're going to be taken. But that takes sitting across from a very mature, trustworthy, loving person who can see us as a pastor, but even more so see us as a human, as the person that we are, whoever we may be. And so just that, having that person, that relationship, or people that we can really just let down our guard, and especially about the tough stuff. I mean, the negative things, the things that often at Marble Retreat in our, we used to do a lot of group counseling. And I heard so many pastors say, I've never said this out loud before. And then they would say it. And I'm like, well, that's a shame that you've been carrying that for 10, 20 years and never felt safe enough to say it out loud until this moment in time. But then when they said it out loud, not only was there healing in that, in confessing to one another, even if it wasn't sin, but confessing brokenness and doubts and shame and struggles. But then we could work on it because now it's out in the open, it's in the light. And so it's so important. But you have to be wise. We do know that. You do have to be wise who you do open up with.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. One of the things that you talk about, and you reference this even in the idea of the fact that it's dangerous, and ministry leadership is dangerous, is the idea of kind of performance, the idea of expectations, and you refer to the silver bullet of ministry performance. And oftentimes, I think we as pastors may not even realize that we've been shot by the silver bullet. Can you, Michael, share some examples of what this may look like in our lives as ministry leaders? Simply because sometimes we have this, heart for ministry to such a degree that we're pressing, and we don't even realize that we're, getting close to or maybe even entering into some unhealthy spaces in our lives in ministry.
It definitely is gray because we should take it seriously and try to be the best we can be in our responsibility as pastors. And so I think there is why it gets confusing. But we do go down that slippery slope of taking it more and more on our shoulders for this ministry to be successful. Here's a recent example. I was at a pastor conference just a few months ago. There's approximately 1,000 pastors attending this conference. And then they did the typical breaking out of workshops. And the big main workshop was in the main auditorium. And it was basically about how to grow your ministry by a pastor of a very large church. And he's up front speaking. And I walk into that workshop, and there's approximately 700 to 800 pastors in there. So nearly everybody is in that one. Then just down the hall a little way, there is a workshop done by a doctor, who, not a medical doctor, but a psychologist who, is really wise and well spoken, well written on the topic of marriage. And he's doing a workshop on how to feed your marriage, keep it healthy while you're in ministry. So I wandered down to that one because I'm kind of just cruising around, because I'm not there as a participant. I'm there, to be at my booth and talk about Marble Retreat. So I cruised in that one. Two pastors in that one. And this is what struck me about that. We know in those 700 pastors that were in the other one, a lot of them are having marital issues, but they are there focusing on how do I grow my church? Now, that's not a bad thing. It's a great thing. It really is important to be well equipped and what do I do? But their focus is locked on to that in a sense. But my marriage may be struggling. And so one of the things that I find that we need to be careful of in this journey is, okay, I make ministry a priority and it needs to be a priority. But do I make it such a priority that I don't have the time, energy, focus to put on these other important things like my marriage, my family responsibilities, even my own care, And so I think that's one example, is that we over and over prioritize the ministry to the deficit of potentially some other important things in our life. And then they begin to struggle. And then sometimes we're not even aware they're struggling, that our marriage isn't doing as good as we think it is because our wife maybe is not speaking up or our spouse is not speaking up. So that is just like one example. I think also, it's also, we lose the joy of ministry, and it's kind of a slippery slope that we get into it. We're so excited, so passionate. We've discovered Jesus. We want to share that with the world. And man, we want to get equipped. We want to go out there and plant a church or join a church. We want to be teaching and preaching and sharing. But slowly but surely we're getting more tired, and we take things more seriously, and we rationalize it as, well, this is just the way it is as you mature and grow, and we begin to lose our joy and our passion, and it becomes more of a responsibility, more of a duty. And that also can be a sign that, okay, we're taking too much onto ourselves in the performance way, and not remembering this is God's ministry, and I can just be who he called me to be and be the best version of me, but yet I don't have to carry all this weight, and it becomes such a burden.
Yeah, that's helpful, Michael. Um, you've identified in kind of the research that you've done, and of course, working with countless pastoral couples, ministers, those in ministry leadership. You identified the three biggest root causes for problems that we actually experience in ministry as unrealistic expectations, isolation, and then poor boundaries. So those are like the three biggest root causes for issues that arise in ministry. And I would say that when we hear that list, I think every pastor would agree. Like, would say yes. That those are kind of the three biggest areas. Unrealistic expectations. Yes, we experience those. Isolation. Yes, we can easily isolate ourselves. And then the idea of poor boundaries. Do we open ourselves up to too much? What's interesting is it seems that the culture of the institution of the church, Michael, really in our present day, actually feeds into these root causes in many ways rather than sort of protecting against them. So, how can a local church pastor um, really kind of address some of these tendencies that are already often ingrained in how ministry is perceived or how ministry is actually executed?
Yeah, it's tough to change culture. I mean, I've heard it said it's easiest thing is to change, your behavior, and one of the hardest things to change is the culture of a church or any institution. I really think it does come down to, though, beginning with educating the leadership. And so, I work with a lot of pastors, and had a pastor that I worked with just not too long ago, who is in the culture of the church. The senior pastor was supposed to do kind of everything.
Mm.
But the church had grown tremendously, which is great over the last 10 years. And so they had hired associates, but the culture was still having the senior pastor do a lot of things that he should have no longer been doing. So it was really beginning to get out of hand, everything he was expected to do. But that was the old culture. So he came to Marble Retreat because he was burned out. He was ready to quit. Phenomenally talented guy, gifted guy, passionate. So it would have been a great loss to the church, to the kingdom, but he was like, I know I need to make these changes, but the church culture, I don't think will allow it. And I'm like, well, you got to start with your leaders. So in that situation, that denomination, it was elders. So he called basically a long elders meeting, and what he called it was a wrestling match with them of like, are you guys going to be here to protect me and my family, so to speak, or are we going to protect the culture and the expectations? And so he did some education with them. One study showed that if you give a pastor a sabbatical, if they have a very specific job description, and if you take counseling off their load, if that's not their area of gifting, it really lowers the amount of burnout, and no church wants their pastor to burn out. So there's different ways. He educated the elders on, look, here is what would be healthy, and then I can be in my sweet spot, and I'll be even better at the main roles of preaching and vision casting and those things that he was really supposed to be there for. And so finally they came around and we're like, okay, we're going to change some things. You're no longer going to be doing as many weddings, funerals, hospital visitations, all these things that they had staff to do, but it was always supposed to be the senior pastor. And so they finally came around, and then they were the ones to communicate it to the church. Here's going to be a change. So I think it is hard to change a culture, but I think you can educate your leadership. And there's lots of studies to do that, to back you up. It's just not your trying to get out of work or trying not to do the things that they always wanted the pastor to do, but it's saying, hey, if you guys want me to be good in these areas, then I need to not be doing these areas. And here's even some research that would back it up. And then once you get leadership on board, then they communicate it to the church body, not the pastor saying to the church body, "Hey, I'm no longer going to do these things. Sorry, folks." But it's leadership saying, "Hey, we're protecting our pastor. We want him to stay focused on these areas. So that's why he will no longer be doing these." And they take it on themselves as the decision that they've made. So I think that's one potential path, but it's definitely is hard to change culture when it's been a certain way for generations or decades.
Yeah, no, no, that's very helpful, Michael. I think that's a kind of a great little blueprint and real life example of how we can approach that. But let me ask this, kind of on that same topic. Um, what about the pastor who doesn't recognize themselves that they are, creating that lifestyle? They're contributing to that culture. How can pastors? I'm thinking of those who are watching along, listening right now. How can they become aware of? Are there certain things, certain red flags that can help them as they're trying to navigate, just a healthy, sustainable rhythm in their life and in their ministry?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good mindset to always have, and this is not from some type of a cynical, but just a cautionary side, viewpoint is if you're a pastor, you're at risk of burnout. Just accept that. That is a risk. It's just inherent in working with people and in carrying the responsibility of your role. It's just inherent. So then it is being aware. And so one of the things, of course, of why pastors call us is some symptoms that they're experiencing that they don't like. That may be depression, it may be irritability, it may be sadness, anger, just different things that they're feeling that they don't like. Like, I just don't feel good. I don't feel like myself. Or two, there's behaviors that they're seeing. I am drinking a little more. I am like, I've cut out a lot of my vacation days. So I used to take all of them and now I'm not. I'm skipping my Sabbath. I'm just, there's things that are changing that I know aren't healthy, but I feel like I have to in this season, and there's always a season and a reason, that we skip things. So I think, looking for behavior changes that okay, I'm justifying it. I think I have to do it right now, but okay, is this turning into a pattern here? The other thing is really the importance of just having at least one person in your life who really knows you and can really see whether you're doing well or not. I mean, and just having that community slash accountability, I think is huge for somebody to say, you're kind of it seems like you're hurting, because we can have our heads down, just keep going. And pastors are known for that. I mean, I think a lot of pastors have a great work ethic. They're very devoted, they're very committed to the point that I'm not stopping to say, how am I doing? So I think just having somebody who truly has their eyes, on you in a sense to say, hey, I've noticed you're not taking your Sabbath any longer for the last while. I've noticed you've been just a little more impatient, a little more irritable, like somebody who can actually speak to you. Which then leads to another way. I think stepping out of your life once in a while is great. I think, 2, 3 days somewhere quiet is just great. I think it's sometimes when we step out for just a short period, we can look back and say, when I look at myself in the last 3 months compared to myself 5 years ago, I don't like what I'm seeing. I mean, 5 years ago, I had this energy and this joy, and now I look at myself and I'm like, wow, I look tired. I mean, I'm just, and so I think just stepping out, because when we're in our life, we wake up every day, and myself, like a lot of us, like, what do I have to do today? And we just start doing it until the end of the day. And then next day we repeat pattern. I think it's huge just to step out of your life sometimes for 2, 3 days, partly for the purpose of looking at your life and saying, how am I doing? How am I doing? How am I feeling? Do I feel full or do I feel empty? Do I feel rejuvenated or do I feel drained? Do I feel peace or do I feel agitated? I mean, what's going on? And then starting to ask the questions, okay, where is that coming from? What's causing that underneath? So you can go down another layer.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's good. Mike, I want to press in a little bit on this because you've had so much experience. You've had the opportunity to work with so many different ministry leaders and kind of walk this path with them. I think that oftentimes, whether we're doing it or not, as ministry leaders, we know that kind of Sabbath, rest is important. This idea, just like you said, of taking a few days to step back and kind of reflect. So we know that that's vital. We know that. The idea of isolation, when we isolate ourselves, when we find ourselves going out the back door after worship gathering as opposed to going out in the lobby, we start and we don't really have friends or even spiritual mentors or people that we're doing life with around us. That's dangerous, right? The whole kind of becoming a workaholic and just, putting ministry ahead of our family and ahead of our own kind of physical health. So those things, I think that they're not super surprising, right? Like whether or not we're doing them, we see them, we hear about them. But Michael, have there been any kind of surprising findings from your work with pastors? Or some things that you're like, oh, that's interesting that you've seen come up, um, maybe multiple times in a pastor or ministry leader's life that kind of contributes to derailing them a little bit, that might be something a little different that we may not readily recognize as, oh yeah, that's one of the biggies, but it's still something that you've noticed does cause friction and tension and can lead to difficult times in ministry and life.
I think there's a couple things come to my mind, and wouldn't say one isn't that far off of what you're mentioning, and one is perfectionism. I mentioned it in the book in a couple of examples, and I've been surprised at the amount of times I've run into that. And it's not a problem until it's a problem, and so it gets very affirmed in the church, and of course in a lot of places in this world of doing things really, really well. But then it becomes perfectionism, and it begins to leak out on other people, and it eventually wears the pastor down themselves. And it seems like the go-to place to ward off insecurity, fear of failure, all that stuff. And so it's just, I have seen it repeatedly in pastors who have burned out. And I'm talking about the pastor who goes up to preach and then has a panic attack on stage, ends up in the fetal position, has to be carried off. And then he comes and is like, I didn't even see it coming. Like, but then I look at his life, like, okay, tell me about the last year. And it was this very driven, perfectionistic lifestyle that was just increasing pressure to perform. That's one. The other one that I've been kind of surprised at pastors are some of the most educated, folks of any career, very highly educated, very intelligent people, very sharp people. I love engaging with pastors about the word, about lots of topics. I mean, just great and just great, intelligent, insightful people, except for when it comes to themselves. And I've worked with, and I give you the example I think in the book, but even I've worked with so many pastors who have said something to this effect: "I was sexually abused as a child. I've never done anything about it, but I don't think it's affecting me." And I'm like, as a counselor, of course, I'm like, "Oh yeah, it's not affecting you. Look how you do boundaries. Look how you do intimacy. Look how you do like lots of things where it's flowing out." And so they come to Marble Retreat. They're wondering why this is going wrong, that's going wrong. So it comes out, I was sexually abused, and sometimes fairly significant. And then the dots begin to connect. And man, I was surprised. And the two main reasons they say it doesn't affect them is I don't think about it and I've forgiven the person, which is not an indicator that it's not affecting you. It's that's a good thing to forgive, obviously. But yet, how
Right.
has this shaped you? How has it changed you? And that's been a surprise to me to see pastors who have, if there was somebody in their congregation, they would say, "You need to get help. You need to find some healing in that area. I think that's probably had a lot of effect on you." But for themselves, they're kind of glossing over it, like, "I'm fine," And again, that's somewhat a guy thing and somewhat a pastor thing of like, I'm fine, it's not affecting me. But that's caught me off guard a few times when I've had pastors say that, when it's clear it is playing out in some of their current struggles, but they had never connected the dots before to that. So it comes back to even this broader issue of, how is my past brokenness playing out in my current ministry? I don't feel like it is, but it probably is. And that makes it, once again, a dangerous occupation. If we're not at least aware of what my brokenness is and some of the symptoms of it, that's half the battle right there. I'm aware that I have this struggle with insecurity or this struggle with boundaries. So now I can react differently because I'm aware, but sometimes I don't have that awareness. And that's been a surprise to me.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. It's interesting as you were sharing that, I was thinking about the fact that oftentimes in ministry, we're very good at helping others through their past traumas or struggles or difficulties with their baggage and brokenness, those types of things, and yet we aren't very good about doing that for ourselves, nor do we tend to turn to others to help us do that. So,
Mhm.
Michael, let me ask you this question: it, should every pastor? This is kind of a little bit of a setup, but it's just a question. Should every pastor um, take the time to seriously look at their upbringing, their past experiences, and how those have influenced or shaped them into the person they've become today? Because I do not think that uh, you know everyone stops to do that. Is that something that is a healthy move? Could it possibly be unhealthy? Where do you weigh in on that as someone who does this type of work, for a living for the kingdom?
I've been supervising in a doctoral program, and a student just finished his DMin project, and it was on emotional intelligence in pastors. And he did this study and had a group of pastors doing an intervention, but there was a fairly significant number, I'd say 25% of pastors that were operating at what has been termed a adolescent level of emotional intelligence, meaning they're reactive, they're defensive. They don't know why they feel they don't know why they feel the way they do, why I'm reacting the way I am. I don't know how to read other people. And of course, part of his project was making the case that puts them at a major disadvantage in doing ministry and reading a room of elders or leaders or people, congregants. And it was interesting to me, again, a fairly significant number scored pretty low on emotional intelligence, whereas other areas of intelligence they would score very high. And a part of that, again, goes back to not knowing how their upbringing has affected them and how their wounds and traumas have affected them, whether in their upbringing or later in life. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm a counselor, so of course I'm going to bite on that. But yeah, I think there's so much value in that, not only for personal healing. I mean, I see pastors carrying stuff that they don't need to be carrying, and they could experience so much more joy and freedom in life for themselves. But also, they so desperately want to be better at ministry that they're also missing an opportunity there to be freer to do ministry, I think, the way God intended to do it through them, to be freer in doing it and not carry some of the burdens they're carrying. And so, yeah, I think there's so much to be gained from taking some time, looking back at your life and saying, what can I learn? What needs to be healed? What lies are still hanging around in my heart and soul and mind from that time that I'm still trying to shake and still trying to work my way out of, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's good. Now, Michael, some or maybe many pastors and ministry leaders tend to be pretty charismatic, outgoing, kind of extroverted, very comfortable in social situations, those types of things, and and sometimes that can make you feel as if you're okay, right? Like you're okay because you're very comfortable around people. You're very charismatic. So there's this just kind of sense that hey, nothing's wrong with me. Talk to us a little bit about how even kind of those skill sets or those that giftedness um, doesn't doesn't mean that you're not going to have kind of hangups when it comes to emotional intelligence or relational intelligence and working with people. Talk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, you're right that we're great at putting on that kind of mask or role, and it ties in often to a natural giftedness, natural personality, being charismatic, being people oriented, and we come across great. To every strength, there is the downside, the dark side, so to speak. Is that we can use that as a cover up for the real pain that we are feeling and carrying, and that comes back again of having this safe space where somebody can ask us the real questions and say, hey, I don't want, your happy face, so to speak, today. I want to know, how did that really affect you when so and so died in the church? I know you did their funeral, you did a great job, but have you grieved yet? How does it affect you? That person, you knew them for 10 years, you knew them for 20 years. What are your feelings? Having somebody who can push in and get beyond that facade, because that facade will pop up if it's just a generic, hey, how you doing, pastor? But if it's somebody, that really knows the pastor and the pastor trusts, and it's a good trust, meaning, okay, this person is safe and wise and really is here for me, then that person can hopefully push through that kind of natural reaction to say, I'm fine, I'm doing great, And so, like, how did that really affect you? And give them that permission to actually go deeper and actually push them a little bit, encourage them, like say, no, pastor, I know that affected you, and just tell me about it. What's going on here? So I think it's important again to have that person, that place where you can push beyond that.
Yeah, that's good. Michael, if you're sitting across the table with the pastor and they're not able to go into an intensive, an intensive time, but you're just speaking into their life. Maybe they're a young minister. You're speaking into their life and trying to provide some guide rails, perhaps some guardrails to guide them. What are a handful of things that you might encourage them with to really you know pull these into your life so that you can um, pursue ministry and be effective and fruitful for the long haul.
I think one thing, and I think there's some more denominations getting on board with this, and even some Bible colleges and seminaries, but I think mentorship is huge. I think finding somebody who's 20 years ahead of you in the game and spending some time with them. I know it's hard to find sometime. They have the time, I have the time, we have the time, can find it in our schedule. But boy, I think that is so huge that they can tell you, here's the lessons I've learned about um, how to do well in ministry. I'm 20 years in now and I still have my marriage, and here's what I did wrong, here's what I did right. So I think that's huge. Just being mentored. I mean, I think it wasn't that far long ago in history when that was more of a way we came into most professions, was through mentorship. And now you graduate, get your degree, and boom, you got a job. And it's like, ooh, that's a little scary at times, And then all of a sudden you realize, wow, this is the real world. And it's different than the seminary world or the Bible college world. So I think it's huge if you can get a mentor who can really pour into you. Two, somebody in your immediate community again, and I've mentioned it 3 times, so it must be on this topic in my mind today. But somebody who's that safe person, the person who takes you out for coffee or breakfast every couple of weeks, kind of thing, and really is there for you, and that they really have the maturity to be able to see you as you and not care about, so to speak, you as a pastor, but you as a person. And so I think that's huge to have that because, sometimes that has to be outside the immediate local community. I know that it'd be ideal if it was, but sometimes it's not available or you don't know the people if you're new to a ministry. But having that person, even if it's, somebody you went to Bible college with or seminary, but somebody who you touch base with. I've got a couple of people like that in my life, and it's just so key for staying healthy to be able to be like, I didn't even know I had anything to talk to until I started to engage with them. And I'm like, wow, I really have something on my mind because they're so safe. I just start going, and then all of a sudden I'm talking about something and realize, wow, that really has been weighing on me. So you don't even know at times until you're in the right setting to work through something. So having that 1, 2 relationships and not putting all that on your marriage. I mean, I think that's a struggle we often do in ministry is unload everything onto our spouse because they're safe. That it's good to talk to your spouse to the level that you guys have worked out and agreed to, and that's different with every marriage I have found. But don't put it all on your spouse. Have somebody that you can go to, that you can talk through these things. And then I'd say do a little bit of reading on being healthy in ministry. There's some tons of great resources. When I started in this field 20 some years ago, it was harder to come by stuff, but now there's so much great stuff, so many great studies, so many great books that say here is a way to be healthy in ministry without negating effectiveness, which is often the pullback. Like, I don't want to do those boundaries because I don't want to be less effective. And that's not true. It's actually the opposite, is that you'll be more effective, when you are full of life and joy and your cup is running over and you're not dragging yourself in, dreading the next meeting, like, oh, I can't believe I got to do this again, that kind of thing, which where you get to when you are heading towards burnout.
Yeah, that's helpful. It's interesting how so many of those things that are helpful and healthy for sustainable ministry um, revolve around community. Really, it shouldn't be a surprise. God created us for community with Himself and with others, and it's interesting to think that in the field of ministry, which is is all about in so many ways being in community, that we can miss those relationships that
Mhm.
are really key in helping
Right.
us to be fruitful and healthy. So
Mhm.
thank you for bringing that to mind. I just think that's kind of a fascinating thing to reflect upon. Michael, tell our viewers, our listeners, if they want to learn more about you, if they want to connect with you, if they want to find your new book, Don't Blow Up Your Ministry. What's the best way for them to connect with you and your ministry?
Well, marbleretreat.org is where you'll find the ministry, and there's some information, of course, about myself and my book on there. So go to marbleretreat.org. You'll find out about the ministry of Marble Retreat as well as some of the things that I am involved in as well. And of course, the book is available wherever books are available,
Yeah,
Amazon and those kinds of things. So you can Google it or search it or go on Amazon if you're interested in getting it. It's a great book that lays out a cautionary tale, but also one of hope and some very practical leading of how to look at some of your own brokenness and get ahead of the game because sooner or later it'll catch up to you in ministry. And of course, I see those folks who are like asking me, how did this happen? And they wish they could dial it back 10 years and say, I wish I would have made some changes 10 years ago and I wouldn't have had to go over this cliff. And so that was the genesis of the book, of just sitting with pastor after pastor who had blown up their ministry, and they're grieving, lamenting very deeply now. How did this happen? I never intended on doing, and you fill in the blank. And then they look back and they saw it coming, but didn't stop it, and just thought they could push it a little further and a little further until it did blow up. And I don't like to see pastors getting to that point. Nobody does. And it doesn't have to be that way. Is always the sad part, is they realize it didn't have to go that down this way, that God actually provides a different path. And for different reasons, I didn't choose that path.
yeah, yeah, and I agree. That's one of the things you hope to catch people earlier, earlier. And that's why community is so important, like we talked about,
Yes.
right? Be able to catch ourselves earlier. But as you said, man, the book, absolutely excellent. Don't Blow Up Your Ministry. Encourage you guys to grab a copy. Just what you said, Michael. It is that cautionary tale, but so full of hope as well. So really want to encourage everyone to check in on that. And you guys can find all kinds of stuff at pastorserve.org. Again, the complimentary coaching session, you can go to pastorserve.org/free session. But all of the information connecting to Michael, to Marble Retreat, to the book itself, lots of other resources are available in the toolkit, which you can find at pastorserve.org/network. So I want to make sure you guys get those links, can find the book easily, can find Michael and Marble Retreat, so you can learn more about that ministry. So once again, thank you so much, Michael, for being with us. I appreciate you making the time to really share from your heart and spend some time with us. And thank you for the book. Thank you for putting your heart into that. And what a great tool I think this will be for the kingdom, and just an opportunity. So thank you for just doing what you do for the kingdom, brother.
Oh, thank you very much. And I really appreciate Pastor Serve. You guys are a great resource for pastors. So great to talk to you today and get to participate with Pastor Serve in doing this work of caring for the kingdom's leaders.
Amen, brother. Thank you so much. God bless you.
Hey, take care.
Now, before you go, I want to remind you of an incredible free resource that our team puts together every single week to help you and your team dig more deeply and maximize the conversation that we just had. This is the weekly toolkit that we provide, and we understand that it's one thing to listen or watch an episode, but it's something entirely different to actually take what you've heard, what you've watched, what you've seen, and apply it to your life and to your ministry. You see, Front Stage Backstage is more than just a podcast or YouTube show about ministry leadership. We are a complete resource to help train you and your entire ministry team as you seek to grow and develop in life and ministry. Every single week, we provide a weekly toolkit, which has all types of tools in it to help you do just that. Now, you can find this at pastorserve.org/network. That's pastorserve.org/network. And there you'll find all of our shows, all of our episodes, and all of our weekly toolkits. Now, inside the toolkit are several tools, including video links and audio links for you to share with your team. There are resource links about different resources and tools that were mentioned in the conversation, several other tools, but the greatest thing is the Ministry Leaders Growth Guide. Our team pulls key insights and concepts from every conversation with our amazing guests. And then we also create engaging questions for you and your team to consider and process, providing space for you to reflect on how that episode's topic relates to your unique context at your local church, in your ministry, and in your life. Now, you can use these questions in your regular staff meetings to guide your conversation as you invest in the growth of your ministry leaders. You can find the weekly toolkit at pastorserve.org/network. We encourage you to check out that free resource. Until next time, I'm Jason Day, encouraging you to love well, live well, and lead well. God bless.